I've always been a curious person, maybe a little too curious for my own good. It's probably what led me to study informatics in the first place. The internet fascinated me. Its vastness, its interconnectedness, and its secrets, especially its secrets. I'd heard whispers about the deep web, the mysterious underbelly of the internet where anonymity reigns supreme, and anything you could imagine, and a lot of things you couldn't, exists. For years, I told myself it was just hype, something I didn't need to mess with. But curiosity gnawed at me. It was like a dare I couldn't resist. A few weeks ago, I finally caved. It started innocently enough. After some research, I set up a Tor browser, followed the tutorials, and dove in. At first, it was all so mundane. Sure, there were sketchy marketplaces offering drugs, fake IDs, and hacking tools, but it was more like an illegal version of eBay than the chilling underworld I'd expected. Then I found the hidden wiki. That's where things got darker. The pages on the wiki were cryptic and disturbing, links to forums, live streams, and bizarre services. I clicked around aimlessly at first, just exploring. But the more I clicked, the darker it got. Forums with titles like Dreamers of the Void and Black Curtain Confessions. Out of curiosity, I joined a chat room. Most people were just trolling, spamming random junk. But one user stood out. Their username was Endgame. They didn't say much, just asked questions about me. Where are you from? What's your favorite thing about the dark web? Are you alone? I didn't answer. Something about their tone felt off. I left the chat and logged off, telling myself it was just a weirdo trying to mess with me. Still, the experience left a strange unease in the pit of my stomach, but I pushed it aside and kept browsing over the next few days. That's when things got worse. One morning, I woke up to an email that made my blood run cold. The subject line was, "Let's play a game." The email had no text, just an image. It was a picture of my apartment building. My address was scrawled across the bottom of the image, along with the name of my university. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. At first, I thought it had to be a prank. Maybe someone from the chat room had traced me somehow. But I used a VPN. I was careful, or at least I thought I was. And yet, there it was. Undeniable proof that someone knew exactly where I lived. I deleted the email and convinced myself it was nothing. A coincidence, maybe. But that night, the knocking started. It was soft at first, just a faint tap, tap, tap on my front door. I froze, listening, but whoever it was didn't knock again. When I checked the peephole, no one was there. I shrugged it off as some drunk passing by. But then it happened again. And again. Every night, like clockwork. Sometimes on my front door, sometimes on my bedroom window. Always just enough to wake me up, but never enough to catch anyone. The knocks would stop the moment I tried to investigate. Whoever it was knew what they were doing. A few days later, I came home from campus to find the power out in my flat. I called the building manager, who said there were no outages reported. When I checked the circuit breaker, it had been flipped off manually. The paranoia started to eat away at me. Every sound, every shadow felt like a threat. And then there was the car. It was an old black sedan. I noticed it parked across the street one night as I peeked through the blinds. At first I thought nothing of it, but the car kept showing up, always at night, always the same spot. One evening, I decided to confront it. I grabbed my phone and headed outside, my heart racing. As I approached the car, it roared to life and sped off, tires screeching. I didn't see the driver's face, but I could feel their eyes on me, watching, mocking. By now, I was barely sleeping. My flat felt like a trap, and I was the prey. I couldn't focus on my studies. My friends noticed I was on edge, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them what was happening. What would I even say? That some faceless entity from the internet was stalking me? They'd think I was paranoid, or worse, that I'd brought it on myself. The final straw came 2 nights later. I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling when I heard it. Footsteps. Not outside this time, but inside. In my flat. I froze. My mind raced, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was my upstairs neighbor. Maybe I was hearing things. But deep down, I knew. I grabbed my phone and locked myself in the bathroom, heart pounding so hard I thought I might faint. I dialed the police and whispered the situation to the dispatcher. They said they'd send someone, but by the time the officers arrived, the flat was empty. No signs of forced entry, no intruder, just me, shaking like a leaf and feeling like I was losing my mind. That was it. I couldn't stay there anymore. The next morning, I packed a bag and called my parents. I told them I needed to come home for a while, citing stress as the reason. They didn't ask too many questions, thankfully. It's been 2 weeks now, and I'm starting to feel like myself again. My parents' house feels safe, familiar, but the experience has left scars. I can't help but flinch when I hear a knock on the door, or when the lights flicker unexpectedly. I haven't gone back to the dark web. I've deleted everything connected to it, wiped my hard drive, even changed my email. But sometimes, late at night, I can't shake the feeling that whoever or whatever it was might still be out there, watching, waiting. When you're in college, you think you're invincible. You do stupid things for the thrill, for the story, or just to prove you can. That's exactly what my roommate Kyle and I thought when we decided to mess around with the dark web one night. Looking back, it's a miracle we made it out alive. It started like any other lazy evening. We were in our shared dorm room, both procrastinating on assignments. Kyle was scrolling through memes on his laptop, while I was half-heartedly pretending to study. Then, out of nowhere, Kyle said, "Dude, you ever wonder if the dark web is as creepy as people say?" I shrugged. I mean, I've heard stories. Probably just exaggerated, though. Kyle grinned, the kind of grin that usually meant trouble. Let's find out. At first, I laughed it off. But Kyle was persistent. He had a Tor browser already installed, of course he did. And within minutes, we were browsing the shadowy corners of the internet. It was unsettling. The websites we found looked ancient, like they hadn't been updated since the early 2000s. Most of it was just sketchy marketplaces selling fake IDs, drugs, and other illegal stuff. Then we stumbled onto a site selling experimental substances. The descriptions were vague, promising everything from heightened senses to strange, dreamlike experiences. Kyle's eyes lit up. "We've got to try this." "Are you insane?" I asked, half laughing, half horrified. "It's probably fake," he said. "But come on, it'll be a good story. What's the worst that could happen?" Against my better judgment, I didn't stop him. He ordered a small packet of something called Noctis dust. The description claimed it was a rare compound used in ancient rituals. We figured it was a scam, some overpriced baking soda or something. It wasn't even expensive, just enough to make it feel real. We forgot about it for a few days until the package arrived. It was a small, plain envelope with no return address. Inside was a clear plastic bag filled with a grayish powder. There was no label, no instructions, just the substance itself. Kyle was thrilled. "This is so weird, it's perfect," he said, holding it up like he just won the lottery. I wasn't so sure. "What if it's, like, toxic or something?" I asked. Kyle waved me off. "We're not going to eat it, man. Let's just see if it does anything." That was our first mistake. Kyle opened the bag, and I swear the air in the room changed. It smelled faintly metallic, like blood, mixed with something earthy. I didn't want to touch it, but Kyle pinched a bit between his fingers, examining it like he was some kind of scientist. "See? Totally harmless," he said, rubbing it between his fingers. Then he sneezed. The powder puffed into the air, and before I could react, some of it landed on my hand. It felt oddly warm, almost alive. I wiped it off immediately, but the damage was done. Within hours, we both started feeling sick. It began with a burning sensation on my skin where the powder had touched me. Kyle complained of the same thing. Then came the nausea, followed by splitting headaches. By the middle of the night, we were both curled up in our beds, sweating and shivering like we had the flu. "I think we need to go to the hospital," I croaked. Kyle groaned in agreement, too weak to argue. Somehow, we managed to drag ourselves to the campus clinic, where the nurse took one look at us and called an ambulance. We were rushed to the hospital, where doctors and nurses swarmed us, asking questions we couldn't answer. "What did you touch? Was it a chemical? Where did you get it?" We couldn't tell them the truth. What were we supposed to say? That we'd bought some mystery powder off the dark web like idiots? We just mumbled something about an accident and let them run their tests. The next few days were hell. Our fevers spiked dangerously high, and the burning sensation spread across our bodies, leaving angry red rashes in its wake. The doctors said it was some kind of severe allergic reaction, but they couldn't identify the substance. All they could do was pump us full of fluids and antihistamines while they tried to figure out how to treat us. The worst part was the hallucinations. At night, I'd see shadows moving in the corners of the hospital room, dark, twisting shapes that didn't belong. I'd hear whispers too, faint and unintelligible, like voices carried on the wind. At first, I thought it was just the fever messing with my head, but then Kyle mentioned seeing the same things. "Do you think it's the powder?" he asked one night, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer. I didn't want to think about it. After about a week, the symptoms started to fade. The rashes healed, the fevers broke, and the hallucinations stopped. The doctors discharged us with strict instructions to rest and avoid any potential allergens. They never figured out what had caused our reaction. Kyle and I didn't talk about it much after that. We deleted everything connected to the dark web, wiped our laptops, and swore we'd never go near it again. But sometimes, late at night, I still think about that powder. What was it? Why did it affect us like that? And most importantly, what if it wasn't just a random substance? What if it was something meant to harm us? A trap, set by someone who knew we'd be foolish enough to take the bait? I'll never know for sure. But I've learned one thing. Some doors aren't meant to be opened. Some curiosities aren't worth satisfying. And the dark web, it's one rabbit hole I'll never go down again.